Hybrid class, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever time you're consuming this piece of educational media, salutations. Today we're going to be talking about persuasive speaking. Now, persuasion is a legitimate effort to affect others' attitudes by providing them information, okay? What persuasion is not? Say this is a handgun. I walk up and point my gun at you and say, give me all your money, okay? And then you give me $40. I haven't persuaded you to give me money. I've threatened to kill you in order to get money from you. That would be referred to as coercion, all right? And we're not going to be talking about coercion. We'll be talking about how coercion is dangerous to persuasion a little bit later on. But persuasion involves two things, okay? First is a change of attitudes. That leads to a change of behavior. Now, the important thing that you need to know here about these change of attitudes and change of behaviors is everything you do in a persuasive speech, every word you use, every sentence you construct, every piece of evidence you use, every gesture you make has got to be dedicated toward moving your audience to that change of behavior. Okay? That's incredibly important, and you have to understand that. So if you're like sitting there saying, hey, I think it'd be great if you would, I don't know, maybe, go out and buy something from this company because people aren't going to listen to you. You need to make eye contact with them. You need to gesture forthrightly, and you need to make sure they understand that you're convinced of this. Okay? Now, I'd love to tell you that persuading people is the easiest thing in the world to do. It's not. Because we as human beings have built into us certain natural obstacles to persuasion. Now, are they barriers? No, a barrier implies that you can't overcome them. These are obstacles. So the first obstacle we want to talk about is called selective perception. Now, if you go back and you remember our lecture on listening and hearing, remember listening is an active process that involves you tuning in while hearing is just being present. It's involuntary. Selective perception is much like that. Listening, you have to choose to listen to something. You have to choose to engage something. I don't know how many times you've talked to somebody and you want to say something that directly confronts their belief system or their worldview, and they'll look at you and go, "Dude, I don't want to hear that. Okay, just stop talking to me about that because I don't want to. I'm not going to listen to you anymore." And so they just sit there and then they tune you out. Okay, I always use the example of the late 1980s, early 1990s when I was living in the Baltimore metro area. There were people who lived in the suburbs that couldn't believe Baltimore was, as a city, had decayed, and there were so many problems in the city of Baltimore. Even though they would drive through downtown Baltimore, they wouldn't see the burned out houses or the boarded up stores or anything like that. They were exposed to it, they just didn't choose to perceive it. Now the next thing would be selective recall. All right? This is just, you choose not to remember things the way that they may or may not have actually happened. Okay? Selective recall means that you don't want to remember it because it doesn't fit in with everything. You choose to remember those things that agree with your existing worldview. Okay? That's selective recall. And we all know somebody who, no matter, if person A doesn't like person B, no matter what great things person B does, those great things aren't going to remember. Person A is always going to remember the bad things that person B did. Okay, my mother-in-law and I had a fight before I even married my wife 30 years ago. And no matter what I do good, my mother-in-law always remembers that fight we had. She doesn't want to remember any of the other things I've done for her, her daughter, her grandchildren. She just remembers that one bad experience 30 years ago. And it was a bad experience. It was her fault, by the way. I just want to make that perfectly clear. Okay? The next thing is selective exposure. Now, selective exposure, okay? Selective exposure is where I just won't see things I don't agree with, all right? I've been given speeches before, given talks, giving briefings, and I've actually said something fairly controversial and had people just go, I don't want to hear any more of this, and get up and leave. Because they didn't want to have their belief systems challenged. Okay? You'll see this a lot these days when we won't get into that, but it is something where people won't go and show up for things because they don't want to hear, a controversial topic. All right, the next thing you got to worry about is degree of commitment. Okay, we all know that guy. I live in Columbia County, Georgia. I've got plenty of neighbors that have got, Georgia flags out, University of Georgia flags out in front of their houses. They've got concrete bulldogs all over the place. Their house is red and black. Their cars are red and black. They've got Georgia stickers on their cars. They are massive Georgia fans, and being a Georgia fan, being a UGA fan is core to their belief system. And no matter what UGA does, they're going to be there for the football team. Even if the football team decided to commit a mass murder, they would still be there for the football team. And they would still think the UGA football team is the best group of guys in the world, okay? That degree of commitment, we oftentimes see things, with our worldview, socialism is bad. Doesn't make any difference what, socialists are proposing. You label somebody a socialist, they hate them, okay? Right-wing nut jobs, okay? Anything the Republican Party proposes, I'm going to dislike because I'm a Democrat, okay? That's the kind of degree of commitment. One step beyond that is public commitment. Now, back during the 2016 election, and I'll say this since the election is over and you can no longer vote for this guy, there was a guy running as a libertarian named Gary Johnson. I thought Gary Johnson was going to be a great alternative to the two major party candidates. And I bought a Gary Johnson sign. I put a Gary Johnson sign out in front of my house. And the guy that lived down the street, who's also an Auburn alumni, who had this big, massive Truck 2016 sign out in front of his house, would drive by and he'd yell at me. And we'd, mostly good-natured banter back and forth about our two candidates. Until ultimately it turned out that Gary Johnson turned out to be a bit of a nutbag. Okay, couldn't answer simple questions about foreign affairs, couldn't answer simple questions about anything. He had a tendency to freeze up in front of a camera, which made him look like he was completely ill-suited for the presidency. But I had already made a public commitment to the guy. I couldn't back away. Finally, my wife and I went and early voted, and I wind up we got back from early voting, and I went over and I pulled the sign up from in front of my yard. And she said, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "I didn't vote for the guy. I really can't in any good conscience leave this sign out of here." Okay? Because I'd made that public commitment. I had to stick to it until ethically and morally I had to just walk away from it. Okay? So again, these are all obstacles. They are not barriers. They are obstacles. You can overcome all of these things, and we're going to talk about next how you're going to do that. Okay? So what we're going to do is talk about styles. Or we're going to talk about, what are we talking about next? We're talking about methods of changing attitudes. So our first method is going to be use logic, reason, and evidence. Now this should always be the case. You should always use logic, reason, and evidence. You find evidence, you build a case, and you tell people exactly why your ideas are so much better than somebody else's ideas. Okay? You need to make it relevant to the audience, but logic, reason, and evidence should persuade them. Okay? To follow along with that, though, one of the things you may ask for is foot in the door. One approach. Foot in the door is where you ask for a little something, knowing that you're going to be able to come back and ask for more later. All right? Teenagers use this all the time. Parents, you'll know this. Teenagers, you've done this. Okay, where you go and say, "Hey, Mom, Dad, Bobby's having a party over at his house on Friday night. It's not really a party, it's a get-together. Okay, and we're going to be there. We're just going to watch a movie. And I should be done by like 9:30, and I should be home by 10 o'clock. Oh, 10 o'clock's not that bad. Yeah, sure, fine. Well, the next day, you go back and go, "Hey, the party at Bobby's, his dad's not going to get home for a little late. It's going to be a little, we're going to be, starting a little later. So I know I said I'd be home by 10 o'clock, but I mean, it's only going to be like 20 minutes, half an hour later. So 10:30? Oh, yeah, 10:30 is fine. Then the next day there's a reason for you to be home at 11, then 11:30, then 12. And then you're at the party and you're calling them up and going like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, things have gotten slow now. Can I hang out till 1 o'clock? Well, it's already midnight. I mean, come on, give me another hour. Okay? You can also do that when you're like arguing for budgets. Hey, listen, I need $100,000 to build this thing. Well, you're really going to need $1 million. Okay? But you ask for $100,000 up front, and once they commit the $100,000, you go back in and say, hey, listen, we've already spent the $100,000. You might as well let me hang on to it, and then go ahead and invest the next $100,000, and the next $100,000, and the next $100,000. Now, the opposite of that, it's called door in the face. Now, with door in the face, if we're going to talk to the teenagers again, here's how a door in the face would look. Hey, Mom, Dad, Bobby wants to go down to Broad Street on Friday night and hang out and watch all the people. I mean, clearly we're not old enough to get into the bar, so we're not going to be drinking. But we'd like to go down to Broad Street and, hang out with people and watch the people go by. We'll probably be home about 1:30, 2 o'clock. No, I can't do it. Well, can I at least go over to his house and watch a movie till about 11:30 or 12? Okay, we'll do that then. You never intended to go down to Broad Street. That was just complete, falderall. Okay? But what door in the face allows you to do is, hey, listen, I need $3 million to fix up this building because this building's falling apart. Yeah, okay, well, if you can't give me $3 million, I can probably get away with $500,000. Can you give me $500,000? It makes it seem like you're willing to be reasonable and make meaningful concessions practically immediately and puts you in a good high ground for the argument, okay? The next is you need to show your proposal is consistent with current values. Now, by current, we mean whatever values your audience holds, okay? Hey, Mom, Dad, Bobby's showing some movies. It's going to be the 8 guys from my lacrosse team. You know all of them. You know all their families. Bobby's parents are going to be there. Our pastor is going to be there. The chief of police is coming over because he lives next door. And, and your parents are going to go, well, yeah, we agree with all of that. That's fine. We'd be happy to do that. Okay? Now, there is also an appeal to an alternative value premise. Okay. Hey, Mom, Dad, you haven't met these guys, but you want me to network. You want me to make more friends. I thought I could go over and just hang out with them and make more friends. Okay, one of the ways this oftentimes achieves itself is like, hey, you go in and you sit there and you can't be prepared to switch during a persuasive event. So let's say I'm going in to talk about diversity hiring. I'm the head of HR of a company. And I go in and I've noticed that I've looked over all our hirings and promotions over the last 3 years, and we've hired nothing but white men. And I need to go in and talk to the company and say, hey, listen, we need to hire a more diverse population. It's right and it's appropriate, and it's the good thing to do for our hiring and our promotions to reflect the community we serve. And we serve a very diverse community, but we're only hiring white males. So we need to really think about that in order to get in line with these values. The CEO looks at me and goes, okay, listen, be honest with you, our lights went out. Let me move around a little bit and get the light back on. There we go. CEO goes, I work for the board of directors. I don't care about what's right. I don't care about diversity. I don't care about reflecting the community. My board of directors just wants to know that I'm making a profit. Okay, sir. Well, let me appeal to an alternative value set for you. Companies with diverse employee bases make more money. Diverse hiring practices lead to increased profits. And here's 8 companies that have exhibited that. And that's all true, by the way. So that's an alternative value premise that you can look to. Okay? So you may not be able to, if you try one that they don't buy into, have an alternative backup system that would, value system that you could go to. Okay? Now I'm going to go with 2 more. Okay? So, first of all, I'm going to tell you about these. These are viable, but be very careful when you're using them. First of all, arouse fear. Second of all, offer a reward. Okay? Now, these are both very viable. They're both very useful. Okay? If we didn't arouse fear, if we didn't use fear as a persuasion tool, children would be getting in white windowless vans with strange men who offer them candy. We teach children to, stranger danger. Danger implies fear, so we teach our children to be afraid of strangers. That happens all the time, okay? And offering a reward. How many of y'all got paid for $5, $10, $20 for getting an A? Okay? And if I got straight A's, or if I got on the AB honor roll when I was in grade school, whichever one of us, me or my brother who got the better grades, got to pick where we went out to eat. Okay? And in my family, we got to go out to eat about once a month, so that was a big deal. Okay? So offering rewards and arousing fear are both perfectly okay, but here's the problem. When you start talking about offering a reward, if you offer somebody a reward to do something and they do it, that's great. But if you're going to need to come back and get them to do it again, you know what they're going to want the next time? They're going to want another reward. Okay? And the next time, another reward. And the next time, another reward. And sooner or later, it's not going to be next time, another reward. It's going to be next time, I want more. Okay? And then the next time, well, you gave me more last time, I need more this time. And then it's more. And then you go from offering a reward to paying a bribe. Okay? It's okay to tell someone it's in their own self-interest, but it's not okay to continue to provide them with rewards, because sooner or later you may run out of that reward and you really haven't persuaded them. You've bought their participation. You haven't changed their attitudes. Okay? And as far as arousing fear is concerned, pretty soon if I arouse enough fear, I'm now coercing them. Okay? And again, it's been in the news, and this is all proven, and we're going to deal with facts for this part. Some of y'all may be a little offended. I'm okay with that, but we're dealing with facts. Remember the first thing President Trump, one of the first things he said when he decided to run for president, President Trump said that Mexico was sending the people that came over from Mexico were all rapists and murderers. Okay? Well, that's fine for, that's a baseline. It's not fine. Take that away. That's where he set his baseline. So if he's going to continue to instill fear, just like in a horror movie, you have to keep ratcheting up the threat. So it became, they're all rapists and murderers, to where they're killing people and bringing in drugs. Then it became, their numbers are increasing. Then it became, they're organizing in caravans. Then it became, they're invading the country. Then it became, we have to send the military to the border. All the while, the numbers of immigrants that were trying to come across the border remained relatively flat. The number of immigrants trying to come into the United States, either illegally or asking for asylum, has only ticked up in the last month or so. Okay? Now the problem is, so many people are so terrified of immigrants that we now see a rise in crime against immigrants because that fear has been so stoked. All right? When you arouse fear, especially when you target an individual or a group of individuals or an ethnicity or a religion, ultimately winds up in violence. Okay? So you have to be very careful if you're going to arouse fear. Same thing with offering a reward. Because again, with both of these, you're not really, if you arouse fear, then bad things are going to happen, and then you come back a month later and they said, well, the threat's hasn't really changed at all. People are going to go, well, I gave you everything you needed last month. Why do you come back to me if things aren't worse? If you're going to arouse fear to persuade, in a lot of cases, you're going to have to arouse more and more fear to maintain that level of dedication. Okay? So again, viable, but be very careful with them. All right? So let's talk about styles. Real simple. 2 choices. There's the one-sided persuasive speech and the two-sided persuasive speech. Okay? One side is where you only talk about your ideas on the subject, your point of view, what you're advocating for. The two-sided persuasive speech is where you mention the other side and you talk about yours, you always talk about what you're advocating last. Okay? So the one-sided persuasive speech is if you're talking about something that the audience doesn't know a lot about. Excuse me, picking up my pen top. Okay? So let's say we're talking about, decreasing fish populations in Clark Hill Reservoir, one of my favorite examples. Okay? If I'm here telling, if I believe that we're using too much fertilizer in the Savannah River watershed and we need to cut back on the fertilizers, that's all I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk to you about how the nitrogen flow into the water causes algae blooms, depriving the water of oxygen, killing the fish. Okay? Real straightforward. Here's the problem. Next week, a guy comes in and gives a two-sided persuasive speech. Hey, listen, yeah, I know your guy came in here last week and told you about fertilizer. And fertilizer can be a problem. But did he mention anything about the increased number of construction sites in the Savannah River watershed and how much soil is eroding off of those construction sites and how that's increasing the particulate matter and decreasing the amount of oxygen in the Clark Hill Reservoir? Okay? Well, you only gave a one-sided persuasive speech. You didn't mention anything about any construction runoff. So it looks like either A, you didn't know about it and you're ill-informed, or B, you were dishonest and you were hiding information. Okay? So the one-sided persuasive speech works when the audience isn't very well educated on the topic, and when you're not going to be subject to counter-persuasion. Nobody else is going to come in to talk about this subject. Two-sided is if the audience does know about it, okay? Or if there is going to be counter-persuasion. Again, you give a one-sided persuasive speech, fertilizer is killing fish, and somebody raises their hand in the back and going, hey, we had a guy in here last week that talked about construction site runoff, and you're not saying anything about that. What do you know about construction site runoff? Well, already you're behind the power curve and you're on the defensive because you didn't mention it up front. Second of all, if you don't know about it, you look like an idiot. And people will be going, why are you even talking to us? Okay? And with the two-sided persuasive speech, you go, hey, now some people will come in here and tell you about construction site runoff. But construction sites only account for 0.2% of the land area in the Savannah River watershed. 0.2%. While 38% of the land in the Savannah River watershed is currently being fertilized. Well, next week when the guy comes in and gives his one-sided persuasive speech on why we need to use fertilizers, hold on a second. That's 30% of the land being fertilized. That sounds like a lot. Okay? Everybody understand? One-sided, two-sided. For your speech in this class, I don't care either way. Okay? Just remember, if you're giving a persuasive speech, there has to be another side, because if there wasn't, you wouldn't try to be persuading them. They would have already agreed with you. Okay? Last thing. And it is the last thing. Last thing you're going to have in your persuasive speech, okay, is a call to action. So when you get to your conclusion, you're going to have the same introduction, a couple of main points. When you get to your conclusion, you're going to restate your purpose, you're going to review your main points, and then you're going to do a call to action. Now, there will be people who will tell you that you can just a call to action for a change of attitudes. That's not going to cut it in this class. In this class, I want you to show that you can do it, is to give me a call for a change of behavior. I need physical actions to be taken in real time and real space. Okay, last semester I had 5 students in 4 classes you should adopt a dog rather than buy a dog. Because 3 million animals are killed in animal shelters every year. If you buy a dog, you're just adding to that population and adding to that problem. Those are great speeches. Okay? It's a great idea. I've adopted a bunch of dogs over the last several years. Okay? But when it came to the call for action, they say, so now you know which is better. And then they go off and sit down. That's not asking me to do anything. That's an informative speech. The call to action for that would be, so the next time you want to get a dog, do not buy a dog. I want you to go to the Albrecht Center, this up here at 1438 Jones Way Boulevard, and I want you to adopt one of the dogs they have there so that you can contribute to saving the lives of one of those 3 million dogs that are going to be euthanized in our animal shelters every year. Go to the Albrecht Center, the Aiken County SPCA, up at Jones Way Boulevard, and adopt a dog. Okay? Very straightforward, very specific actions. Okay? You have to give us something to do. Now, what's not going to fall into that and be a good idea for a persuasive speech in this class? Don't smoke. Most people don't smoke. So what are you going to do at the end of the day? Your call to action is to not do what you're not already doing. That doesn't make any sense. Okay? Fasten your seatbelts. Not a good persuasive speech. Because everybody already knows that. All right? You're not changing any attitudes. You're not changing any behaviors. Okay? And again, you're talking about something that's borderline coercion. If you don't buckle your seatbelts, you're going to die. Okay? That's not persuasion. That's coercion. Okay? So what I want you to do is to write a good speech that has a good call to action. Physical action in real time, in real space. Okay? Not some sort of change, something you do mentally. I want you to tell me to use an active verb. Write a letter. Go to a store. Go buy something. Help, whatever. Give us a physical action to take. Okay? All right. We can discuss this in more detail when we come back from spring break. That first day back, I believe it's the 15th. We're going to have class. We'll be watching Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. That won't take up the whole class. We'll be able to talk a little bit more about persuasive speaking at that point. And then the next week, which I will believe is the 22nd, you will be doing your persuasive speeches on class. That will be our last day of class together. Okay? So then we'll wrap everything up for the semester after you do your persuasive speeches. Now, your outlines are going to be due to email to me if you want me to review them by noon on April the 15th. Noon on April the 15th, okay? That way we've got everything covered, and that way you have a chance for me to give you feedback. I know that seems a little early for you guys. It's a week, but unfortunately I have classes that are doing their speeches on that Thursday, so I have to give them plenty of time, so everybody has to turn in their outlines at the same time, okay? I want you to remember when we come back from spring break, you have class on the 15th and the 22nd. On the 22nd, we'll be doing your persuasive speeches. Your papers are also due in on the 22nd. Then we're going to roll straight into exams. The final exam schedule is out. If you Google Aiken Tech Final Exams, Spring 2019, you'll get a PDF and it'll be very easy to find. Okay? So that wraps this episode of Public Speaking, SPC 205. I will be out of contact. I'm going out of the country. There will be no internet access for the next week. I will be back on the 14th, Sunday the 14th. If you need to contact me, you can send me an email, but I won't be there to see it until the 14th. After that, we'll see you in class on the 15th. All right. Everybody have a good, safe spring break. As my old boss always said to me, I don't want to hear that you've been in jail, in the hospital, or in the newspapers. Okay? We'll see you in a week.